From folklore and fairies
to monsters and mysteries, it came from the Maritimes. Rolling the bones, but literally, my co-host, Chelsea.
It's my co-host, Evan.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome to It Came From The Maritimes, an Atlantic Canada folklore podcast. Today's topic is the vacant vessel known as the cursed ship, the Mary Celeste. As a warning, this episode discusses death, including suicide and the death of a child. Obviously not the funnest in some parts, but have you ever heard of this boat before?
I am familiar with the tale, but it's been a long time since I've done a deep dive into it, so I can't wait to talk about it today.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of different retellings of the story, even though it's all a little mysterious. I know there's even a movie with Bela Lugosi, I think, starring it.
Oh my gosh, how have I never heard of that?
I don't know.
To watch it.
So the Mary Celeste was a boat built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia in 1861. It was registered in nearby Parsborough and was originally named the Amazon. It had its maiden voyage under Captain Robert McClellan of Economy, Nova Scotia. They were going to 5 islands to pick up lumber that would eventually be brought to London, England. But on the way there, the captain became sick and the boat returned home, where he died just a few days later. This seems to be the first indication of the curse on the Mary Celeste.
It's certainly an ominous start to the voyage.
And I want to say, just to clarify, they weren't on their way to London and turned back. They were making their way from, Parsborough to 5 Islands.
It's not far.
No, not too far at all, and had to turn around. So it was really they can't even really make it over there. So later, John Nutting Parker took over as captain. And while they did make their way to London, it wasn't without incident. On their way out, they ran into some fishing equipment near Maine. And then when they did make it to London and they delivered the lumber, but on their way out of the English Channel, they ran into a brig, and then the brig sank due to the damage from the impact.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm curious if maybe this captain just wasn't the best at controlling the ship there, because it seems like he's hitting a lot of stuff. Less curse and more just kind of needs some practice.
Right, not ideal either way.
Exactly. Over the next couple of years, fairly eventless for the Amazon, and it was mostly used to do trades with the West Indies. Then in 1867, there was a very large storm which blew the boat ashore in Cape Breton, where it was eventually abandoned as a wreck. A businessman there sold the ship to people in New York, who then repaired it and renamed it to the famous name, the Mary Celeste. After that, it changed hands a couple of times, but eventually ended up in the property of John Winchester, who sold 1/3 of the shares to Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. It was Captain Briggs who would be the second captain to be victim of the curse.
And that's with a bunch of stuff happening in between, so...
Yeah, so I mean, there would be years at a time where nothing was going on too much with it. It doesn't seem like it has the best reputation either way. Captain Briggs had a cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, very specific, and he was supposed to be shipping it from New York to Genoa, Italy. He left on November 7th, 1872, and he set out with his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 men to make the transatlantic journey. That was the last anyone heard from any of them. On December 4th, 1872, a Canadian ship, the Dei Gratia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's Latin for by the grace of God. They found the Mary Celeste 400 miles east of the Azores Islands of Portugal. Just to bring the connection back to the Maritimes, the Dei Gratia was a ship that was built in Nova Scotia and Bear River and was captained by Nova Scotian David Morehouse. Captain Morehouse was a friend of Captain Briggs and knew that the Mary Celeste had left New York 8 days prior to his boat. So he became concerned, as there was no way that their boat should have caught up to the Mary Celeste.
Can I just say, what are the chances that it was a Nova Scotia-built ship that found the abandoned Mary Celeste, which was a Nova Scotian-built ship? Because it was found off the coast of Portugal. It's not like it was found off the coast of Nova Scotia. So
no, I know. It is kind of a weird coincidence.
Right?
So the Dei Gratia crew boarded the vessel, and they found that there was no one aboard the Mary Celeste. There were no signs of violence, And the ship was still in pretty good condition considering, and all of the cargo was in place. There was 6 months of food and water, and all the personal belongings of the crew were left behind, though the chronometer, navigation charts, and ship's register were gone. They found that the lifeboat was gone, but it appeared that at one point it had been tied to the main ship by like a long rope. So kind of like they were still connected, tethered, when the lifeboat was in the water at some point. They also found that one of the 2 pumps in the hold was disassembled, and there was about 3.5 feet of water in the cargo hold. The last entry in the log was from November 25th and read that they were 6 miles from Santa Maria, which is one of the easternmost Azores Islands. So just to give some context here, that means that there was about 9 days where this boat was just seemingly floating without people, because if they were on the boat, why wouldn't they be filling the log? And it just made its way probably about 400 miles just drifting passengerless at sea.
Weird.
Yeah. They were unsure what happened to the crew, but they decided they would take advantage of the situation and bring the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar and collect the salvage fee. So basically at the time, there was, I guess, the people who insured the boat and were in Gibraltar, which was a British colony there, southern Portugal, I believe. So they took it there because they were like, well, I have no clue what's happening. It's really sad that my friend has just disappeared, but also, let's make some money.
Mm-hmm.
They arrived in Gibraltar, and an investigation was launched into what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste. The Attorney General was very suspicious of the crew of the Di Gratia and wasn't ready to make a payment of what would have been $46,000 in the money at the time, so in the 1870s, to people who they believed may have killed the crew. So I'm going to talk about the different theories about what might have happened to the crew there, but I want to go into a couple of things. First of all, I couldn't find an inflation calculator that went as far back as the 1870s, so I'm not sure how much that is in today's money, but I know it's quite a bit.
Sounds like a ton.
Yeah. Also, I want to say that if you find some different sources about this, I swear these people know more about what happened in that boat in the 1870s than I know, like, what my house looked like yesterday. Like, they have such meticulous notes of there. Like, just go to the Wikipedia page even, and I know that's not even as in-depth as other places. So I apologize if I'm missing out on some details. I'm kind of doing a broader overview because they're going very far into depth. They're like, oh yeah, there were like 3 hatches and one of them was open, but one of them was closed. And it's like, okay.
We'd be here all day if we went into that detail.
Exactly. So one of the first theories that people thought, what could have happened to the crew? Mutiny. This was originally thought to be an option, but it seems weird that there was no signs of violence on the boat. You'd think if there was a mutiny, there would be some sort of signs of a scuffle. Also, Captain Briggs was well respected and liked, and he had carefully formed a crew that he would trust to be around his wife and children. Also, why would the crew abandon all of their possessions if they were mutinying? And also, why wouldn't they either take the boat or sink the boat? You know, like, why would they just kind of leave it astray?
I feel like the point of mutiny is to gain control of the ship, so it's odd that they would just leave their belongings and let it be.
Exactly, yeah. The next theory was pirates. There were pirates in the area at the time, but again, no evidence of violence. Usually pirates would be a bit more aggressive against the boat, whereas this, like, there was nothing really showing. Also, why would pirates go kill the crew, not take any of the cargo, not take any of their valuables? It just didn't make sense. The main theory that the investigator had there was that the crew of the Di Gratia attacked them and wanted to gain the salvage fee for the boat. There was a big investigation into this, and there was no real proof ever found. And again, Captain Morehouse and Captain Briggs were friends, so it seems unlikely that he would attack his friend. But that being said, there was a very large salvage fee for the boat, so sometimes money is enough for those things to happen. Another theory was their cargo was industrial alcohol, and it was all in barrels. Industrial alcohol was known to leak from barrels, have fumes, and also cause small explosions, which seems concerning. They didn't have any proof that there was any, like, things going up in flames, but apparently one of the hatches looked like it was blown open recently. So people think that what might have happened was they heard a small explosion under the deck, grabbed their navigational gear, went into the lifeboat, but then they tied it to the main boat so they wouldn't get separated. And then for some reason, they decided, oh, maybe we'll just let things be open, let the fumes get out, maybe we'll be safe. And then for whatever reason, probably because they were close to an island at the time, they might have just cut loose and tried to go to that island. Again, there's no proof that they ever did, but that's one thing that people think. I will note that they found 9 of the barrels were empty, but also, and this is how granular the investigation was, they found that the barrels that were empty were red oak, I believe, rather than white oak.
Oh.
And red oak is apparently more porous and just would let the alcohol leak out anyways. Like, again, I do not know who was doing this investigation, but they were in depth.
Yeah, they were thorough.
The other theory is that with the pump breaking in the bottom of the boat and there being some water in there, they found about 3.5 feet of water, and one of the pumps was disassembled, suggesting that someone was trying to fix it. They might have been afraid that the ship was sinking, and that thing was packed full of barrels. So people think, and this is kind of the most popular theory now, people believe that they saw all the water there. They couldn't really tell how much water was in there because everything was so tightly packed. And then also they were just worried because it might have come in kind of a surprising rate. They did find on the deck of the boat a makeshift sounding rod, which is a tool to detect the depth of water. Just like with the explosions, they might have gone in the lifeboat, tied themselves to the boat in hopes that things would settle out, but then they got afraid and just decided to cut loose and head out. Now, there's some other theories here that have less kind of credence to them, but they are put around. Some people think there was an underwater earthquake that just knocked them all off the boat and caused some of the flooding there. Some people think there was a water spout, which is like a tornado but over water. Some people think a giant squid or sea monster may have just knocked them all off the boat. Some people think that aliens may have abducted them. And also there's some theories that there was some sort of stowaway monster on the ship.
You never know. I mean, we're not talking about the most obvious theory. Have you ever heard about the Voyage of the Demeter, like that segment in the Dracula novel?
I have. I haven't seen the movie, but that's what I was thinking of when I heard that.
Well, I'm just saying.
Now, I will say that there's been a lot of fictionalized accounts of this. One was written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle of Sherlock Holmes fame. It was actually what they believe would have been one of the stories that really launched his writing career.
Oh, interesting.
Because it was written 3 years before his first Sherlock Holmes. I will say that his writing career took him away from practicing medicine. So, I mean, you know. But he had a fictionalized account of a crew member, and in his story, he said that his thing was about a enraged former slave who went on a little bit of a massacre on the boat. Again, this is fictionalized. I don't believe there was anyone who would have been a former slave on the boat even. But that became so popular of a story that it kind of brought this back into attention to a lot of people. It was almost forgotten for a while and then brought back. And then there was also a movie featuring Bela Lugosi, who was a murderous sailor and, you know, killing the people of the boat.
I gotta see that movie.
I think it's from 1935 or something, so.
I love a good vintage movie.
In the end, no one truly knows what's happened to the crew. The Attorney General couldn't find any proof that the Di Gratia crew had any role in the disappearance of the crew of the Mary Celeste, but they were still suspicious about them. Because of that, they only paid out a fraction of the expected salvage fee. I believe it was about 1/6 of what they expected to be getting for it. Each person would have got around $800, which I did a inflation calculator from, I think the earliest date was 1913 to today, and that would still translate to probably like $25,000 in today money.
So still a lot of money.
I wouldn't sneeze at that. So after all the investigation, I will say the investigation by the Attorney General, he did not consider sea monsters or aliens as an option.
Honestly, very limited scope.
I know. Disappointing. But anyways, after this, the Mary Celeste was eventually sold at a loss because people truly believed that it was cursed at this point. It did eventually return to working and had some uneventful years, but that changed in 1879 when there was another incident. Captain Edgar Tuthill fell ill and they had to stop at the island of St. Helena. The captain died on the island and became the third captain to die as captain of the boat. The ship changed hands more times over the year and eventually ended up in possession of a group from Boston. Captain Gillam Parker, along with the group from Boston, loaded the boat with worthless cargo but on the manifest claimed that the ship was filled with valuables. In January 1885, he ran the ship into a reef in Haiti, wrecking the hull beyond repair. He then immediately rowed to shore and started the process of insurance claims. This may be obvious now, but they were trying to commit insurance fraud, and they were immediately found out.
Good.
It went to trial, but the jury was not able to come to a conclusion. And before a second trial took place, they were able to convince them to allow them to just pay the money back because they didn't want to face the possible penalties of a trial, especially Captain Parker, because he was guilty of a crime called barrantry, which is willfully casting away a ship, which comes with the death penalty.
Oh my gosh, that's a serious crime.
Yeah. In the end, it didn't really matter because of that group, Captain Parker died in poverty 3 months later. And of the others, one committed suicide and another had a mental breakdown. Even when the Mary Celeste was sunk, the curse of the ship was able to claim more lives.
Oh my goodness, the Mary Celeste is not messing around.
I know, it's kind of all that, and then it ends with insurance fraud, and there's just so much going on with this boat.
That was such a good story. Honestly, I am so curious about this.
As I said, like, you can probably get granular to a degree that I just couldn't handle for this, but
I'll be in my room with like a spreadsheet, like a murder board on the wall.
I know, like, honestly, you could probably have a full podcast just going through all the theories about what's happened on the Mary Celeste, but honestly, I was really interested. As I said, it's not fully set in Nova Scotia, but it's a Nova Scotian boat, and it has a lot to do, and if you go to the area today, there's still a little, there's a sign that indicates that it was where it was built. I know they were trying to get funding to build a bigger memorial, but I think that all fell through based on what I heard. But anyways, thank you for listening to that. And now I'm going to end with a little segment here. This is one that I call Folklore, Fight or Flight. We talk about a lot of different creatures, different ghosts, different spirits on this podcast. We need to consider, are we safe from them?
Ho ho, bring it on.
I'm going to ask you a couple of creatures here, and I'm going to ask you how you think is best to protect yourself from them.
I'm ready.
So the first creature is a werewolf, like the Lunenburg werewolf. What would you use to protect yourself from a werewolf?
A silver bullet.
Yeah, so silver is considered one of the best ways to protect yourself from a werewolf. Some other things are plants such as wolfsbane or holly. Or, if you know the werewolf, you can address them by their Christian name.
That's good to know.
Exactly. How about a vampire?
Oh, let's see. Stake through the heart, garlic.
Classics.
Feel like those are good.
The other popular ones tend to be religious symbols and holy water and sunlight.
True.
I think the vampire of Ingonish there was a less traditional vampire. Didn't seem to be eating people as far as we knew, or drinking their blood, I guess.
No, he was just a nighttime roaming goth as far as we know for sure, but...
You know. Now, we had a recent episode about fairies. How would you protect yourself from a fairy?
Carry a piece of iron on you and don't eat their food. Don't dance with them.
You sound like you get the point. Yeah, there's also some people say salt, and then also certain plants such as rowan, which they find are sacred, so they don't want to...
I never actually knew that. That's good to know.
Yeah. And finally, one last one. How do you protect yourself from ghosts?
A circle of salt?
So yeah, Circle of Salt is one of the popular ones. I found one place that just said, carry a pocket full of salt. And I am just imagining, like keeping my back pocket just like filled, just dump out the salt shaker.
That would be very messy. Isn't another one black tourmaline? Can help keep you safe?
So there's a lot of different like crystals and things like that are supposed to keep you safe. Certain metals like silver also. Silver seems like pretty across the board. If you've got some silver, you're probably good. And then also putting an iron horseshoe over the entrance of a place will help to keep ghosts out.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. You can find us on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at It Came From The Maritimes. You can find us on X and Blue Sky at ICFT Maritimes. And if you have any Atlantic Canada folklore you would like to see covered in a future episode, or any spooky encounters of your own, email us at itcamefromthemaritimes@gmail.com. If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It helps people find us. At the end of each episode, we end with a little folklore tip. Nothing to take too seriously, just a bit of fun. Chelsea's going to share one with you, and I think this one is related to ships. It might be a familiar one to you.
This is a Nova Scotia classic that I probably say once or twice a week. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning.
Thanks for listening.
If only the Mary Celeste had taken warning.